Welcome back in, everyone, to the Lucky Shots podcast. Ricky Larson here with you again today for week 10 of the fantasy show. What a crazy week. Had upsets happen, had some players go for some ungodly amounts of points, some players we didn't expect either, which we'll get into right away with our fantasy heroes. We'll start at the quarterback position. The quarterback won this week with only 123 passing yards. The top quarterback is Justin Fields. Did it in a losing effort, but he claims the quarterback one spot. He had 123 yards through the air, but 3 passing touchdowns, which is a good sign if you are a Bears fan, 2 a Justin Fields fan. Yeah, 123 passing yards. It's not necessarily ever going to be the quarterback stat you want to see, but as long as he gets in the end zone 3 times through the air, you're okay with that. But what really lit up his fantasy day was 178 rushing yards on 15 carries for 1 touchdown. He ended with 42.72 fantasy points. So can we expect more of this out of Justin Fields? Maybe, that if you can expect that, that would be a huge get for your fantasy team here late in the year, especially with, we're kind of at that midseason push. We're right at the turn, right before we get to fantasy playoffs. And if we look at Fields over the past 3 weeks, huge games. 42 points last week, 26 the week before, 23 the week before that, 18 and 17 respectfully in the games prior to those. So big game for Justin Fields. The quarterback too, not really a shocker, but kind of, because he hasn't really been up in this top 2 conversation for a lot of the year. But Patrick Mahomes, he ended at the quarterback 2 spot with 34.14 fantasy points, the only 2 quarterbacks to score outside of 20 points. He had 446 passing yards with a touchdown and an interception. That is completely opposite from Justin Fields, but you get the points you take the points how you get them. 446 through the air. He also had 63 on the ground and a rushing touchdown. So again, very nice to supplement his fantasy day. For your running backs, Joe Mixon. Saw him on the cover. He is the overall fantasy player of the week. He had 153 yards on the ground for 4 rushing touchdowns. Last time we saw a game like this was last year with Jonathan Taylor, guys like that, getting that many touchdowns. But he wasn't done on the ground. He also had 4 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown through the air. 55.1 fantasy points for him this past week. Huge game. Definitely not what you would expect from Joe Mixon, who normally is about middle of the pack. This week, he was absolutely involved. Are we going to continue to see that? I don't think so. But again, he is a very middle of the pack guy. Very consistent in getting you fantasy points. And then once again, up here in the fantasy heroes for running backs, we've got Kenneth Walker III for Seattle. Thank goodness, because his 2 touchdowns on the ground actually helped propel me to a big win over the number 1 team in my division this week for fantasy. He had 109 with 2 touchdowns, 3 catches for 20 yards, giving him 27.9 fantasy points. At the receiver position for your fantasy heroes, we had Davante Adams. Again, another top performance in a losing effort, but Davante Adams, you drafted him to be one of these top 5 guys. He hasn't really been that so far this year, but finally puts on for you. Gets 36.6 fantasy points. Huge game for him with 10 catches, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, 17 targets. Kind of what we expected with him going to the Raiders. It helps that there's no Darren Waller. So really, it's turning into the Green Bay Packers of it's just throw the ball to Davante Adams. Obviously not working out football-wise for the Raiders, but if you're a fantasy owner, you love to see it. And then at the wide receiver 2, we had Tyreek Hill. He had 7 catches, 143 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets, giving him 27.3 fantasy points at the receiver position. For your tight ends, this guy sunk me in one league. I ended up losing by 5, and part of that was because of Dallas Goedert. He had 8 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown, giving him 24 fantasy points on the day. I love to see it. I'm a huge Dallas Goedert fan. As many of you may know, I'm living in South Dakota. He's from SDSU. Kind of great to see somebody from one of those smaller schools go out and do a lot. Dallas Goedert, he's a huge playmaker. Good to see him finally get himself into this top category. And your tight end, too, was actually Cole Kmet. If Justin Fields is going to have a good day, somebody receiving the football for those, 4 touchdowns, or 3 touchdowns. Somebody's got to be on the receiving end of those, and it was Cole Kmet. He had 5 catches, 41 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 22 fantasy points. Now, it's halfway through the season. We've marked the halfway point, so we're not going to talk about any villains right now. We will talk about some good Samaritans, though. How about Geno Smith continuing to get the job done for Seattle? He had himself a pretty good game of 20.8 fantasy points, 275 through the air, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. I also just realized that means I hit the over with Geno Smith's passing yards this week against Dylan, so that's always a nice thing to remember. Then for the running back position, some good Samaritans there. Travis Etienne, how about that? He's got another big week for himself, 26.9 fantasy points. 2 catches, 17 yards, 109 on the ground, and 2 touchdowns. A lot of 2 touchdown performances out of guys here because the guy right under him, Kenyon Drake, playing for Baltimore, not expected to be the main guy, but their whole backfield's kind of in shambles. It's all over the place. Kenyon Drake has actually been one of the more consistent guys for them. He had 93 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, tacked on 2 catches for 16 yards, giving him 24.9 fantasy points. Austin Eckler still up there. Cordero Patterson made a comeback this week. For Atlanta, he ended up with 18.3 fantasy points. So, not a 20-point day, but if you can't complain with 18 fantasy points out of a running back, especially if you gambled and rolled the dice on him this week. I was going to roll with Tyler Algier. Talked about that last week with my DFS lineup, with my love-hate list, and then we get the news Cordero Patterson's back. Goes out and scores about 18 points. So that's good there for him. Some usual suspects up at the top for receivers. You got Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. But how about this guy returning back into the top 5 after week 1 is Christian Kirk. Had himself a pretty good game with 21.6 fantasy points, 8 catches, 76 yards, and a touchdown. That was actually in the winning effort against the Raiders. So that was a hard game to pick. You ended up actually getting quite a bit of fantasy value out of that game with the receiver position, the running back, and in Travis Etienne. Derek Carr put up some decent numbers, as did Trevor Lawrence. Wasn't anything spectacular, but a game that we actually got some fantasy value out of without realizing it. So now let's hop into my love-hate start-sit of week 10. Halfway through the season, we've got a lot of question marks, a lot of guys that, we expected to be where they're at. Sorry, just getting into my app where it's telling me I won both of my matchups, so gotta love that. So let's look at the quarterback position for this week. Who do we love? Who do we hate? And who's startable this week? Got to look through a little bit, but I would actually say my love candidate this week, hate to say it, we just talked about him in the heroes, But how about Justin Fields? We just talked about the stats he's had the past few weeks, and now he's going up against Detroit, who is, let's face it, abysmal on defense. And Justin Fields showed, at least as a fantasy quarterback, he doesn't have to get it done through the air with passing yards. He can get it done with his feet with 178 rushing yards, and then tack on 4 touchdowns on top of that. I think he could have another huge week this week for Chicago, for your fantasy team, and for Detroit. Is he available? Nope, somebody's got him. Okay, so may not be available in many leagues, but if he is, could be a very, very good stream option going into this week. Who do I hate? How about we? And I also hate to say it because I love Justin Herbert, but this week going up against San Francisco, who is 9th against the quarterback position, it's just not a great matchup. And then if we look at Herbert, he hasn't scored 20 points since week 4. And he's only got 3 20-point performances this year out of 8 games. It's just been a down year. He doesn't have all of his weapons. Who knows when Mike Williams is going to come back? Who knows if Keenan Allen's ever going to play this season, or if he's just going to pull a Michael Thomas and maybe be in, maybe be out. We can honestly call it a Keenan Allen because this is what he did last year as well. And again, Herbert hasn't broke even 300 yards since week 4 when he had his last 20-point performance. So tough matchup, kind of down weeks. I'm just not feeling it this week for Justin Herbert. Who else is startable? I mean, you got Jalen Hurts, always startable, going up against Washington, who's 21st. So that's a good matchup there. Let's see. I'd even say, let's get risky. We could start Jacoby Brissett going up against Miami. Miami is the dead last defense against the quarterback position. And Brissett, he's coming off of a bye last week, but the week before had a 20-point performance. Consistently kind of next to 300 yards. He hasn't broken it this year, but consistently right there. Has a touchdown in almost every single game. And I honestly think this is the week before Deshaun Watson is supposed to come back. Maybe Brissett goes out and tries to prove something, and what a better defense to do it against than the 32nd ranked against quarterbacks defense in Miami. So kind of a sneaky play, probably a sleeper this week, but I think Jacoby Brissett could have himself a really good game. I still think they're going to lose, obviously, but I think Brissett could go somewhere into the top 10 category for quarterbacks this week. Let's get to the running back position. Who do we love this week? Well, we love any running back who goes up against the Chargers, but when it's Christian McCaffrey going up against the Chargers, we absolutely smash play love this. He's coming off of a bye, but the week before that, he's coming off his 40.26 performance where he had a rushing touchdown. He had a passing touchdown. He had a receiving touchdown. He was involved in every single facet. Now going up against the Chargers, who just give up fantasy points. They say, here you go. Go right on into the end zone. They just cannot defend the running back position. So I normally don't try to go super obvious with my love picks of the week, but you just cannot help but love the Christian McCaffrey matchup. Who knows? Maybe we see a second straight week with a running back having 50 points. Who do I hate this week? We're going to go with Dameon Pierce. Tentatively, I mean, he's going up against the Giants. They're 5th against the running back position. The only reason I'm really hesitant about this is Dameon Pierce can get the job done against pretty much anybody. He had almost 14 points against Philly, which isn't outstanding, but it's over 10 points, close to 15, and very serviceable as a running back in your lineup. And he's a guy who has 2 20-point performances, both of those coming against the Chargers in Jacksonville. So take that with a grain of salt, but I just don't think it's a great matchup for him going up against the Giants. I honestly think the Giants could build a lead in this one as well, so that kind of takes Dameon Pierce out of that equation. So I just think it's going to be a tough week for him. Who can we start this week? You can start Travis Etienne. That's going to be a great matchup for him going up against the Chiefs, who are 27th against the running back position. And yes, I think the Chiefs are going to be up in this game, but I think this could be a week where Etienne gets more involved in the passing game. He's been involved a little bit, 2 catches here, 3 catches there, 10, 20, 30 yards receiving, but I think this is a week where they're going to have to get a lot of people involved. I think he's going to be one of those beneficiaries, and we've just seen it the past 2 performances that if you give this man the football, he's going to make things happen. So I think that is a great matchup there. Possibly, if Jonathan Taylor even plays, that could be a good matchup going up against Vegas, but who knows with Indy and who knows with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, we're going to put him in the start category. He had 15 points against Tennessee, but drafted as the number 1 running back in fantasy. 3 weeks with single digits, it's tough to swallow. We're just hoping he can get back to that week 1 performance where he had 161 yards, a touchdown, and 27 fantasy points. This could honestly be one of those performances if he's healthy and gets back into the lineup. Let's see. Probably one last guy that we can put in our start category, just because he came back last week, had 18 points, and now he's going up against defense that is 30th against the running back position. Let's start up Cordero Patterson. I think it could be a very good week for him. Some sit candidates, possibly Dalvin Cook, but I think he's still going to be involved. But he is going up against Buffalo, so that's going to be tough as is. And then we're going to sit Aaron Jones. 1, he's questionable. 2, he's going up against Dallas, who is 4th against the running back position. And if we look back on Aaron Jones the past couple weeks, not even the past couple weeks, last week against Detroit, in a game that he should have had a lot of points, he only had 6.5. The injury came back negative for his ankle. So he should be able to play this week, according to Adam Schefter. So he's probably going to be in, but I don't think it's going to be pretty. So I would sit Aaron Jones as well. At the wide receiver position, got Tyreek Hill, got Cooper Kupp, got Stephon Diggs. All around, there's a lot of receivers you can start this week. Who is the love candidate this week? We're going to go with... Again, I went super obvious with the running back, so I don't want to go super obvious with the receiver. Who do we love this week? That's tough. We're going to go with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's going up against Washington. They're 25th against wide receivers, and the connection between Brown and Hurts has just been phenomenal this year. Past 3 games, 5 touchdowns for A.J. Brown. He had 3 against Pittsburgh, 1 against Houston. Now he's going up against Washington, where the only problem with this game is Jalen Hurts going to be able to have time to throw a lot of passes, a lot of deep passes to A.J. Brown like we're accustomed to seeing? That's going to be tough because we just saw Washington last week. Their defensive line created problems. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, but I think if this Eagles offense wants to continue to roll, it's going to be through Jalen Hurts. It's going to be through A.J. Brown. So that is the love of this week. Who do we hate? It's always tough to say a Tampa Bay wide receiver, but we're going to go with Mike Evans going up against Seattle, who I believe is 4th against the running back position. The past 2 weeks, he's had 11 targets. He even had 15 the week before that. Put up 18 in week 7 and week 8, but against the Rams last week, 11 targets, only 5 catches and 40 yards for 9 points. Another reason I lost in a league, because he was not super involved. I have the stack of Brady and Evans. All I needed was 5 more points. Throws the ball to Evans, and it's not even catchable. It's pass interference. I don't win the game. So maybe it's a little bit of a vendetta against Mike Evans, but he is the hate candidate this week going up against Seattle, who is fourth against the receiver position. Some other startable candidates. Let's start up Christian Kirk again. It's a game where like I said, I think the Jaguars are going to have to be passing a lot. And maybe last week is a good resurgence for Christian Kirk back into this offense. I think you could expect at the very least 15, higher end into the 20s, just based on what they're going to have to do to keep up this week. Another startable guy, let's say DK Metcalf. We're sold on Geno Smith, but we don't really talk about the receivers that he's throwing to. I think DK Metcalf is a very fine option. He had 17 in week 8, 14 last week, but back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. So that's huge. He's got 3 other games besides those 2 over 15, one of those being over 20. And it is Tampa Bay. It is supposedly a tough defense, but they're 16th against the receiver position. And if we love Geno and we think Geno's going to have himself a decent day, he's got to throw to somebody. And I think that could be DK Metcalf. I'm comfortable starting Juju Smith-Schuster this week. I was rooting against him last week because he was somebody that played that Sunday night game, was it? And I just needed him to not go off, not have a huge game. And he was serviceable, but didn't have a huge game. 18 points. Very scary. Holding my breath that whole time. But if we look at his past 3 performances, it's been outstanding. 22, 25, 18, 12 targets in the last game. Really starting to become, I don't want to say that number 1 guy, that's Travis Kelce, but starting to kind of take over that secondary role that Tyreek Hill had. And Patrick Mahomes loves him. He's starting to now learn how this offense works, the way to operate to get open for Patrick Mahomes. So I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to have himself a great week. Some sits this week. Let's sit Chris Godwin. I think that's going to be tough as well. Same reason. Going up against Seattle, who's 4th against the receiver position. And, honestly, that's it. You get lower into it with, sit Adam Thielen. I've been saying that all year, but there's a lot of pretty favorable matchups, and the matchups that aren't favorable are guys who are pretty good, like Justin Jefferson. He's going up against Buffalo, who's 10th against the receivers, but it's Justin Jefferson. You're not going to sit Justin Jefferson. You're not going to sit Devontae Adams, who just had a week or wide receiver 1 week this past week, just because he's going against Indy, who's 2nd. CeeDee Lamb, you're not going to sit him going up against Green Bay. Yeah, you don't expect a whole lot of points to be scored, but you still expect CeeDee Lamb to be involved. So not really a whole lot of sit candidates for the wide receiver position this week. I think you can plug and play just about anyone, and it's going to be okay. Let's look at the tight ends, which it's a completely different story. You look at the top 5 projections, it's all red. All tough matchups. You got Travis Kelce going up against Jacksonville, who's 7th. TJ Hawkinson going up against Buffalo. Dallas Goedert going up against Washington, who is 2nd. Gerald Everett, who I talked about last week as a love candidate, going up against San Fran, who is 9th. And Pat Freiermuth going up against New Orleans, who I still don't know if they've allowed a touchdown to a tight end. Actually, they did. They did last night on Monday Night Football to Isaiah Likely, but still a tough defense against the tight end position. So, who are we going to make the start of the week this week? Start of the week, let's look. David Njoku. He's got an ankle injury, but he is planned to play on Sunday. And before he went down, he was super reliable. 23 points, then 9, kind of just routine tight end day. Then 14, another routine tight end day with 8, then 14 after that. I don't think you can expect a bomb game out of him, but I think he comes in and gets at least 10 points. We just had Jacoby Brissett be a guy that we're going to start this week. And I think Njoku is a good part of that. Some other start candidates for us: George Kittle going up against the Chargers, who are 15th against the receiver or the tight end position. We could put Tyler Higbee in here, going up against Arizona, who's 32nd against the tight end position. And Tyler Higbee, another guy who was kind of a model for consistency, kind of has fallen off. He didn't get any points against Tampa, only 3 against San Francisco, but those are 2 tough defenses. Only had 1 point against Carolina before the bye week, but before that it was 11, 17, 10, 14. So I think this is a great week. He had 10 the last time he played Arizona. I think that's perfectly serviceable for your tight end position. Who are we going to sit this week? Sit Mike Gesicki. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of playing him, and he gets 1 catch when Tua goes off for 30 points. He only had 1.3 last week. It's just, I'm done with it. I hate him. He's the hate candidate this week. Don't play him, and that's what we're going with. Some other sick guys. You know, I could venture to say sit Pat Fryermuth. I think maybe eventually in this game he'll get involved, but I don't know how late he'll get involved, and I don't know how effective he will be going up against New Orleans. So I think you got to sit him this week, and I'm not too particularly happy to play any tight end against New Orleans. Let's see. Dalton Schultz might be a tough play as well. He's going up against Green Bay, who is 3rd. And it's just been up and down for Dalton Schultz. His last 2 games before the bye was 9 and 13. But before that, it was 0, 0, 1, and then 13 in week 1. A guy that I was really high on last year, not so much this year. It's a tough matchup going up against Green Bay. I don't think a lot of points are going to be scored, so I would also sit Dalton Schultz this week. But that is it for the fantasy show today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow. We'll have Dylan Corbett on for Lucky Bets. We'll check in with how we did in DFS, how our prop bets went. We'll look at who cashed in last week, and then look at some other lines going into week 10. So that's tomorrow with Dylan Corbett for the Lucky Bet Show. We'll see last Thursday. I was not feeling it. That's why there wasn't a show. Should be feeling it this Thursday, so tune in for that one. But that is it for today. Thanks for joining, guys. We will see you next time.